Franca. I am your host. This is Francamente, the podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for listening. And without further ado, let's bias your football content. Hello. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. We're still in summer mode. I'm more sun-kissed than I was last time. I'm even peeling. So I hope y'all are enjoying. If you're watching on YouTube, watching me get red/tan. I'm so happy. I'm like summer me is me in my best form. I'm such a mermaid. I spend as much time at the beach as I can. I don't get a real vacation, but I'm trying to go to the beach as much as I can. Shouts to the Jersey Shore. I don't care what anyone says. That Jersey Shore is where it's at. All right. Like, leave me alone. I hate this country, but if I were to be patriotic for anything, it'd be Jersey. So don't at me. All right. Don't at me. The Jersey Shore, Asbury Park, is where it's at. Belmar. I mean, all the beaches, the northern beaches, obviously. What am I wearing today? I'm wearing a kit that is like a summery kit because it's lime green. I can wear these colors, when I'm tan. This is a Cardiff City kit from a couple years ago. Actually got this for free at a fan fest. Okay, this is the second free full kit that I've worn on this podcast that came from a fan fest back in the day when the swag was good. Okay, the last fan fest swag sucked. Those things have gone down the drain. But look at this. It's like a pretty nice little, kind of minimalist, lime green, sexy kit. So that's what we're wearing today. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're not, look for the clips, look for the selfies, which I always take and post every single episode, and you'll see my lime green kit. What are we gonna talk about today? We're in summer mode. I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, I'm a student. And so I love to enjoy summer to the fullest, right? Like in summer, I am like a different person. I'm like in summer mode, whether I work through it or not. Like this summer, I'm working through it. But like summer mode, me is like chill, right? We're laid back. We don't need to, have all these planned out episodes. Like we're in summer mode. It's chill. So I'm just going to talk about whatever comes to mind. I'm also not watching as much football because I'm out and about. And I'm also working a lot. I'm doing a lot of things have changed in my life, and I'm going through a period of transition in many, many ways. And so, my focus is on lots of things. So I haven't watched as much football, but there's tons of stuff to talk about. This will be, one of those multi-topic episodes, not necessarily have a tying thread, although it always comes, right? It always comes once we've been chatting for a while. So I want to start off by talking about the GOAT. I mean, you can't have an episode of Real Francamente, especially now that he's playing in pink. And not talk about the Messi discourse because it's so good. It's so good that every single week it gets better. First of all, shouts to my friend Amanda, okay, who literally went viral overseas, international viral sensation. Amanda, who tweeted a silly tweet that was meant to draw attention to how bad the U.S. healthcare system is, and ended up on every single news source world. Her tweet was about how healthcare, how selling her ticket to the Messi game, her Red Bull ticket to the Messi game, helped her pay for her ACL surgery, right? And that shit, it started off a whole worldwide frenzy. I saw it outside of her posting it. I saw it Ole posted it in Spanish. That's an Argentinian media thing for football. People are going insane. I literally am that's my friend, my mutual. Shouts to her. But how crazy. But it's funny because a lot of it's being framed as oh, Messi saved this girl's life, and it's no. The point of that was to show how ridiculous the U.S. healthcare system is, and B, how ridiculous it is that these ticket prices are as insane as they are, right? So just had to shout that out. But one of my favorite things about what's going on with Messi is that I just love that there's so many fanboys, right? Like there's so many MLS and I use and the term boy in this instance is gender neutral. Okay. There's so many fanboys that are like, oh, MLS is so great. Like Messi like sucks. Like who cares if he's here? Like no big deal, blah, blah. Like MLS is great without him. And this singular man, granted, he's the man, right? This is what I tweeted, but he is the man. But like this one man has wreaked havoc on the entire league in a matter of days. In a matter of days. Like, I just love that people are like, oh, he's not that great. And like he's about to break records already. Like, and he's just been playing for a day. So like keep it coming. I just love to be right. Like I know I'm always right, but I love to be proven right. I love when I can be like, see, y'all motherfuckers were wrong. And I have been telling you all along what is what. And here we are. Here we are. The proof is in the pudding. So like, oh my God, like what a freaking crazy storm of awesome that he's brought like to the league. And people can just like keep talking their shit, but like look at the numbers, right? Like he's wreaked havoc on the league in a matter of days. Oh, chef's kiss. I love it so much. What's going on? So the last episode recorded before the US so deliciously got knocked out of the World Cup in the just like the oh my God, the best way possible. It was so heartbreaking for the US. Like it was so heartbreaking for the US, and it made me so happy to have it be like in a moment of like that less than a millimeter, right, of the ball, right? Like just, everyone was like on pins and needles, and that heartbreaking moment for US fans, like, oh my God, I reveled in it. It was so good. And it happened pretty soon after that that episode recorded. So I was like, oh, like, that's the thing about recording every 2 weeks is that you miss some stuff, but like I'll always go back and talk about it. But how great for those of us that are anti-imperialist to see the US like just like fumble that bag so deliciously. It was so good. Didn't love to see Jamaica lose, although they lost to Colombia, which is another, global South superpower. As of recording that right now, we're set for the final. That's it. Every other game has happened. And unfortunately, they're, the global South teams didn't last too long. The final set, it is Spain versus England. I'm torn because they're both colonizers. I should, based on my identity and my ancestors, like want Spain to win, but the Spain Federation is so fucked. They did like so much fucked up stuff to their players, and like they said, like the fact that they still made it to the final is kind of like, it's like poetic injustice, right? And so I don't know, I feel like I'm gonna root for England, just based on like how corrupt the Spain Federation is. But I mean, two colonizing teams, also two powerhouses of football, so like I'm not mad at it. I think it's exciting. And I think really cool, discourse has happened in like those corners of the internet that are still, like fighting for social justice. Cool discourse around like the arrogance of US fans, right? Even from folks who like prior to that I hadn't seen say such cool stuff, but like just pointing out the arrogance and like how that can literally be the thing that holds you back from greatness, right? Like because the US has all this arrogance, they have a chip on their shoulder. Is that what that means? I actually don't know if I'm using that expression correctly. Oh well. They are very arrogant about like how many World Cups they won. Like, yes, they have dominated. Let's look at the resource situation. Let's look at the imperialism. Let's look at all that. But also, like, you can't expect that just because you have dominated, you're going to continue to dominate. Like, you have to work on it. You have to invest in your league. Like, someone made the correlation between the US, kind of having this lackluster performance and the lack of resources that go into NWSL. Like, people will watch the World Cup and then like not support their local team. And I have nuance to share, right? Like we have to analyze that too from the perspective of like it happens like the World Cup, the men's World Cup has very little effect, right? It has some effect, but it's like if you put it on a graph, it goes like it spikes up a little bit. Like I'm talking about popularity for like men's club teams in the US, like MLS teams, right? It spikes up a little bit after World Cups, but those fans tend to not stay longtime fans. Sometimes they do. And like it's not that there's like no effect, but just like that's true for the men's World Cup, it's also true for the women's World Cup. Like some people, either can't go see their team or for whatever reason, like you can't compare, right? You can't compare the level of play in the NWSL or in MLS with the level of play at the World Cup. The World Cup is literally the best players in every single nation, and it's different. National team play is very different than club team play, regardless of where. And like some, not necessarily for the better always, like, you've got like, I'd rather watch Barcelona than like two, bottom tier countries that are not football countries play each other because that can be boring too. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like it's different. It's different. And so that discourse isn't really helpful. You see like the virtue signaling of like, oh, if you watch the World Cup, like now what team do you support? And it's like, again, like we're doing this like virtue signaling, like gatekeeping thing. Like I think women's soccer and football is growing naturally, organically, and we have to continue to put more resources into it. I think we see the result of when federations put in more resources to it, because for a while the US dominated because many other countries didn't have leagues, at all, let alone well-funded ones, didn't have players. And like now we're seeing more and more leagues develop throughout the world, which I think is great. I think it's awesome. But what do we do with this discourse, right? Like, can we, like, first of all, like the US league is not the best league in the world for clubs. Like we're seeing, European leagues invest a lot of resources, make academies and things like this for their women's teams. Like we're seeing a lot of hype around like Arsenal, around, like Liverpool, Manchester United, like, Premier League, like British teams, English teams. I hate that whole thing, but you get what I mean. Are putting a lot of resources into their women's team. So I think the US needs to take a long, hard look at themselves and their reign throughout, the time that the World Cup has happened, the Women's World Cup, and see what needs to change, because this is parallel to that that blind nationalism that makes us not progress on any social justice front, right? Like the reason why we are regressing in terms of human rights, basic human rights, is because people refuse to acknowledge there's a problem. Right? Like we can't have a discussion because it's seen as like too critical, too radical. And if we can't have a discussion, we can't point out flaws. And if we can't point out flaws, we can't fix flaws. Right. So the same thing happens at this level. Like we need to take a long, hard look at ourselves, all of us, everyone, right? But like US soccer, especially, to see what could be fixed, because just because you've held this, like this reign of like winning so many World Cups, like what are you going to do to continue to advance the women's game on every level? And everything comes down to the same thing. Every issue in US football across the board, whether it's league, whether it's country, whether it's whatever, comes down to the same thing. And that is pay to play needs to be abolished. US football, like, because pay to play affects men, it affects women. Like this is the reason, like the decadence of the US women's team is directly related to how ridiculous it is that we have this pay to play system in the US, because who gets to make it to be a national team player? Rich people are not good at sports. So we need to revisit that episode, right? Of this podcast. Rich people are not good at sports. It doesn't matter the gender, right? And so when are we going to finally take a long, hard look at ourselves to make changes that would be considered on the systemic level, right? Including abolishing pay to play. It's the only way. Obviously, the goal is to abolish capitalism, remove like money from sports. Like that's a long-term goal. That's a lofty goal. But there are certainly things that we could do right now to make sure we're working towards the future of US football if we want to, right? But what we continue to do is keep our blinders on and keep acting like everything's great. We keep rehiring the same coaches after they've had scandals. I mean, like everything in US football is in shambles, right? It's in shambles. So it's time for us to reevaluate what do we want. And it starts with the fans, right? It starts with the fans and all that discourse of like the blind patriotism, the arrogance, like it's not going well. It's not going well. So we have to really reassess what we're doing, how we're supporting what we're supporting, right? If we want the US to continue to succeed. I mean, I love to see the US continue to fail. Like I love it. I mean, I would love for none of this to be fixed so that they can just continue to fail and like imperialism, can be slapped in the face consistently. But for those people who want to, want their country to progress, what are we doing? What are we doing? And on that note, going to break.
Hey, what's going on? It's DJ525 here, and you're listening to the best podcast on earth, Francamente. Be sure to follow on Twitter and Instagram at Francamente. Check out the website for more content, www.realfrancamente.com. Subscribe on your favorite platform, leave ratings and reviews. Bias your football content.
We are back, and so is Premier League, y'all. Premier League is back. Some disheartening stuff has been happening on the rape culture front. Several teams have welcomed back with open arms their rapists, including my own team, Manchester United, Arsenal. Who else? There's another big one, and I'm forgetting. But why? Why? What are we doing? It is really heartbreaking. It's really like at this point, it's one of those things that gets really tough to continue to call out because it's so ingrained, and like not that makes us stop calling it out. It's just that it's like really tough to continue to be, especially like a non-male football fan, when we continue to be slapped in the face with the message that like victims aren't to be believed, non-men aren't to be believed, and like these men will keep their jobs. Cancel culture is not real. And so like that's disheartening. And how do we continue, right? How do we continue? This is the question overall for this whole entire run of this podcast, like just in life, like for those of us that are social justice minded, how do we continue to support something that is so harmful? And at the same, and like how, there's so much that's so harmful. And at the same time, like we continue to watch it, right? Like there's like a hypocrisy there. And so how do we, that's always the question. How do we battle that? How do we live with ourselves, right? When we are supporting such, awful stuff. So it's almost like bittersweet that Premier League's back. It's bittersweet to watch the men's game throughout the world when rapists continue to just go free. When problematic figures, like Neymar has had some real problematic shit. And like now the whole thing is that he's gone to Saudi Arabia, and like now, it's a whole thing. I don't like it, man. I don't like the slippery slope that we're going down with this new force, this new, force of, that's behind so much of football these days, which is sports washed, dirty oil money. I don't like it. I don't like it. The whole World Cup, that just happened, the Men's World Cup. everything. There's so many examples. Not ironically, coincidentally, speaking of Premier League, and I mentioned Neymar because like it's like I feel like the Saudi league is now going to become like a cesspool for like fucking assholes, like fucking like bigot and like idiots and rapists and like, corrupt, like problematic figures, misogynist, because he's the latest big name linked and like officially gone there, but like we've got Ray Pinaldo already, so like what like I don't it's so gross. It's so gross to see this sport that is my life, that I grew up on, that is my religion, my like everything like right revolves around football. Um just go down such a dark path. I feel like we need, you know what, maybe I just had this thought. I'm just going to say I think we need another episode of analyzing Galliano soon, because I think bringing it back to that essence is necessary for all of the shit that's going on. To like bring us back to that, like, okay, there's a reason why we still do this. There's a reason why we still do it. Galliano will be really good at reminding us, so we'll do that soon. Cavani to Boca Juniors. He debuted. Oh my god. Oh my god. Like what? Like South American football. Oh my god. Boca Juniors. Like, come on, to see him in that kit, it's so good. It's so good. This is a parentheses because I was just reminded of Galliano and global South, Southern cone supremacy. And I was reminded of Cavani. Just like how awesome. Again, those little pockets of joy will always, for me, will always be linked to that Southern cone global South supremacy. Like always, like those moments of joy will always like come from my, my places in the world. Anyway, to get back to the Saudi supremacy thing, look at the table. I mean, okay, it's been one game. Everyone has played one game. But the Premier League table after one game, who is first? It's Newcastle. What happened to Newcastle recently, class? Anyone? Raise your hand. Don't all answer at once. They are the latest to be, taken over by the sports washed money. So at coincidence, I mean, it's been one game, anything could happen, but in the top four, we've got Newcastle and Manchester City, the two dirty oil money teams. And like Arsenal's fourth, but like they're not unlinked, right? To that kind of that region. I mean, they're like Manchester United is too, like there's so much of that money just seeping in, and I could see it. The second Newcastle got bought out, I said it. I called it. And it started almost immediately, the difference. And now, like, look, they're first after one game, but like that's not nothing, And we get these little pockets of, again, like to go back to the pockets of joy thing. I don't know that I would call this a pocket of joy because it's interesting, right? And there's nuance. So Pep Guardiola, to me, a god. Like, first of all, he's so sexy, right? He's so sexy. I love him so much. Like when he like just gets angry, I'm just like, oh my god, Pep. Like, come on, Daddy Pep. Call me. But no, we're not. We haven't done a thirst segment in a while either. I love me some Pep. Love me some Pep. Okay, so anyway, Pep, a complex figure. One of the greatest managers to ever do it, hands down, definitely in our generation, but ever. And while he's complicit, obviously, so I don't want, people are going to come for me and like be like, oh, man, whatever. Like, yes, I will preface this by saying he's complicit in the corruption as the coach of the biggest case of sports washing probably there's ever been, right? Manchester City. But as a Catalonian, right? As a Catalan, he's had his moments of really cool analysis and critique of things like FIFA, of things like the status quo. Like, if I didn't know better, and I do, but if I didn't know better, I would almost say he's subversive. and he's had subversive moments of like talking to the press, of like bringing things to light that are real issues, while obviously avoiding the elephant in the room, which is corrupt, dirty oil money from, you know, from these countries. He has his moment, and I think he very much has like an internal dilemma. He's very aware that he's complicit, and at the same time he has so much to say, and like obviously so much he doesn't say because he can't, because he'd be fined or like whatever, you know, they're always being censored. But there's a really cool account. They're on Instagram and Twitter. It's called Fútbol y Política. It's in Spanish. They're all like Spanish run, but like a lot of it is, you know, posted in both languages. And they posted an interview, and I'm not sure how recent the interview is because he has said stuff like this before. Pep has, but it's definitely worth mentioning that he went off on a rant about modern football and the look for this interview and the way that that we have unrealistic expectations of these players, which are just human. Now, again, I will preface this for people like my dad, who doesn't listen to my podcast, I don't think, but I'm always referencing him, right? So like he's always talking about like modern football being ruined by money, which is true. There was a really cool graphic that was posted when Manchester City played. Who did Manchester City play, y'all? It wasn't Brentford. Maybe it was Burnley, or maybe it was Burnley. Whoever Manchester City played, they put up a graphic, and my dad has always said he wishes they did this for every single game. That there was in addition to the scoreboard, he wishes there was a board that said how much each team has spent on their players. And I think that's brilliant. It's true, because modern football is being ruined by money. So, but where my dad and I disagree is where he goes like, oh, of course, like logic says the team that spends the most money should win. While yeah, that money always does win. There's also an element to that where like football is not logic, right? Okay. All of that aside, Pep had this brilliant interview where he pointed out how the expectations of these modern players who are just human, at the end of the day, they're human, right? And we expect them to go here, go there, play here, play a derby here, play a derby next week, and play a game on Sunday and on Wednesday and on Friday. And like, it's more and more and more expectations, right? Like how much more, like the pressure that we put on these players, on these coaches, especially when they play for these big teams. And he was calling it out. And I think that's brilliant. And I think it's so true, the way that we treat these people like machines. And I get it. We pay them a lot of money. But the problem with that discourse is focusing on the money, like that capitalist, like, you know, like urge to consider people machines, to consider people like that we own them. We like, you make that much money, so you have to perform for me. And it's like, there's such a problematic kind of, you know, underlying thing there. But like, that's the reality. Like, they're under so much pressure. And what Pep said was like, and of course, and so they asked him, they were like, are you saying this because you hope it changes? Or do you think that it's never going to change and it's going to get worse? He said, it's going to get worse. It's not going to change, because what happens if a player falls, they're replaced by the next one. It's like robots, right? Like, oh, you can't play this guy because he's injured. Bring on the next one. Bring on the next one, and deliver. Like, he's under a lot of pressure. Before that, he was at Barcelona. I mean, he's one of the greatest managers of all time. He's only played, I mean, like, he's only coached, you know, famously massive teams. Like, I can't imagine that pressure. Ultimately, they're still human. And let's remember that while, yes, we need to call out capitalism, yes, we need to call out imperialism, we need to call out corruption, at the end of the day, they're people. The people that are getting paid. We should get more mad at the system and at FIFA and at the organization that allows that kind of money to get exchanged for human beings. That's fucked up, right? We have to call that out. And yeah, we can, you know, criticize players and coaches and everything like that, but like, ultimately they're getting paid that much because some entity said that that's what they get. It's not that they're blameless and we're like, oh my God, poor little, like, you know, person making billions of dollars. No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like, let's have that nuanced discussion, because a lot of people are brushing off Pep by saying like, oh, but he takes the money. Yeah, he takes the money. Like, the man is good. He's the best, you know, he's one of the best to ever do it. The system is set up so that like he makes a lot of money. Yes, it fucking sucks. And we need to overhaul the whole shit. Right. But that doesn't mean that what he's saying isn't valid. We've gone off the deep end, right? And there's a lot of hypocrisy. This reminds me of another type of hypocrisy related to people who will play the card, when they're when Nacional lost to Boca Juniors, there was a whole discourse about how Nacional is the poor man's team and Boca Juniors has so much money. Bitch, this was again Enrique, my dad. Okay, my dad's point, 100%. He said this, and we all went oh my god, that's brilliant. Yeah, okay, you can compare Nacional, what they get versus Boca Juniors, but don't look like Nacional is some little small town, little fucking underdog. They're not, because in the Uruguayan league, would compare Nacional to Liverpool. There's a Liverpool in Uruguay, but it's a small team. That's not a fair, you can't claim that sometimes, but then still be oh yeah, we're this massive team. It's we have to always be putting these things in perspective, right? What can we have the nuance to understand what Pep is saying, call it out, and still call out the fact that Manchester City has too much money, that Pep has too much money, that these players have too much money, but ultimately that's the fault of whomst? Whomst's fault is it that all this money is being exchanged, right? It's systemic. It's the same thing that you see in society when people blame human beings for being poor and not the system and not capitalism, right? This is the exact, FIFA is the most corrupt organization on the planet, okay? And we're letting them get away with murder while we blame Pep for making money. Of course we should abolish billionaires, and that includes coaches and players of sports, right? And millionaires. But let's have the same energy for the organization that allows this. Because that's where I get into the dilemma where it's we're all a bunch of hypocrites. If we really had this smoke, we would all just stop watching, but we don't do that, right? And we don't even call out FIFA as much as we should, or the system as much as we should, as with everything else. So the table has Newcastle on top at the moment. Again, it's the first game. So obviously I can't wait till the end when you see the little graphs where it's started, and every single team, until it evens out. But very interesting stuff going on here with Newcastle. We'll see where we end up. Yeah, it's an interesting table in Premier League, to say the least. So with that, I think we'll stop here for now. Time flies by, so before you know that, we'll be on our next episode. Call out systems, have nuance, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you liked it. This has been Real Francamente, the podcast. My name is Franca. I'm your host. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Real Francamente on both. Check out our website, www.realfrancamente.com. You can find lots of content there, or contact us directly with any questions or comments. All links and ats will be in the show notes if you need them or want them, and for ease of not having to spell it yourself. Please subscribe on your favorite platform. Maybe leave us a rating and a review if you like it, and share it with your friends. Don't forget to buy us your football content. Gracias. Ciao.